Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Walk and Talk Dog Training Podcast. And also, welcome to December. If you're listening on release day, how is everybody doing? Is your Christmas tree up? Has your dog chewed up any baubles yet? We're asking all the big questions. Are you sick of Christmas music already? Hideous confession from me. We've been playing Christmas songs in the car every single day since about the beginning of November. So unfortunately for me, I actually am utterly sick of the whole shebang by now. I feel like I'm ready to just fast forward to about March 2026 at this point. But I don't want to be too much of a Scrooge. I hope you are all enjoying the festive season. Bailey's by the fire, Macaulay Culkin running around New York causing chaos. There is a lot to love about December, isn't there, really? Anyway, mild wine and tinsel aside, let's take a hard left and get back on track with the topic of today's episode, which I hope is going to be really helpful to just about everyone, like every dog owner in one way or another. It's either something you know a little bit about, but not a lot, or you know a lot about, but you don't know what to do with that knowledge when it comes to actually training your dog and making it practical. So, either way, we're going to cover all the bases here today. And hopefully, like I say, there will be something valuable for everyone to take away. What am I talking about? Well, it's the training technique that we in the industry call proofing. And I think that whilst a lot of dog owners are familiar maybe with that word itself, proofing, if you've done your basic puppy classes and whatnot, it's still one of the most misunderstood topics in dog training. And honestly, one of the most fascinating once you get into the nitty gritty of it. It's the reason that your dog will sit beautifully in the kitchen every single time you ask, but they forget the word sit even exists when you're in the park. It's the reason recall feels effortless in your garden every single time and absolutely impossible on that long stretch of field path that you walk every day. And it's the reason that reactivity training can feel like 2 steps forward, 1 step sideways, 10 steps back, you trip over your own feet, depending on where you are. And the truth is, none of that means that your dog is stubborn or that your dog is naughty or they're trying to embarrass you in front of that one other dog walker who always seems to appear just as your dog has a meltdown. The reason is much simpler and it's also a lot more clever. And that is that dogs are seriously contextual learners. So they don't learn skills in an isolated, abstract way, but they kind of learn almost in like pictures, is the best way to think of it. These multi sensory snapshots that are created by the dog's brain. And understanding this, really deeply understanding this, might just be the thing that transforms how you see your dog's behavior forever. And it might just be the knowledge gap that you needed to fill to really push your training progress forward from here on in. And so, for that reason, today we are going to explore what contextual learning actually is, how your dog's brain stores information, why emotions make certain behaviors stick like glue and others disappear completely, and most importantly, how you can use this understanding to massively level up your training, especially if you have a reactive dog. Or an easily distracted dog, or a teenage dog, or honestly, any dog that lives in the real world. Honestly, I think this is universally valuable, like I said before. So, without further ado, let's dive straight in and take a look what I mean when I talk about contextual learning. So typically, when we think about learning, we tend to think about the human version of it. So we hear a word like sit, and we understand it as a verbal cue that can be applied anywhere in the kitchen, in the park, at the beach, you're at someone else's house, same word, same meaning. But your dog doesn't perceive the world in that neat and tidy, language-based way. Their brain almost creates what we can think of as like a little video clip of the moment that learning happens. But it's more than a video in the way that we recognize videos, because it's like multimedia rich, right? It includes the scent in the air, the acoustics of the room, the position that you are standing in when you give the cue, the emotion that the dog felt at the time, the floor texture, the sound of the fridge humming in the background, the lead hanging over the chair behind you and what that means to your dog. All of that stuff goes into the sit file in your dog's brain at the time of learning. And so, interestingly, when you go somewhere else with your dog, the video clip changes, and your dog's brain genuinely, honestly wonders, is this the same thing? Are we doing that thing again that we did before, or is this a different picture entirely? Is this something completely new? Because there's a lot of outlying variables that have changed here. And this is why your dog might be able to hold an incredible sit stay at home, but it completely unravels when you're out on that muddy footpath and you've got a spaniel running past you both. It's because it's a completely different picture. It's a different emotional tone. There are different sensory cues going on. And not only this, but in this scenario, the part of their brain responsible for survival and vigilance, the amygdala, that's also lit up like a Christmas tree. And this part is something that we can relate to a little better as humans, right? So imagine this. Let's say you learn a new skill, maybe juggling. How very retro of you. And you're in your living room and it's calm and it's quiet and you've got plenty of time and no one's watching. And so you practice and you get fairly decent and you're feeling pretty good about it. You're feeling pretty confident. And then I grab you and I take you to the middle of a busy shopping centre, and there's people walking past and there's noises everywhere. And it's December, so it's absolutely packed, and it's Saturday, and someone's dropped a smoothie on the floor, and there's multiple children screaming, and there's the smell of pretzels drifting over. And I say, okay, juggle now, same skill, go, start juggling. And you can barely do 2 throws without dropping all the balls, and you look like you've never practiced in your life. You would probably be furious with me and look at me as if I'd lost the plot, because of course you can't just juggle in the middle of all of that chaos when you've only ever, until this point, done it in your quiet, empty living room at home on your own with zero pressure. Your brain now is completely overwhelmed with sensory input. You haven't practiced in that environment. You haven't built up to that at all. And you're emotionally in a completely different place as well. Well, your dog feels exactly the same way when we throw them in at the deep end at the park, when there's the smell of a picnic drifting over and there's children shouting and there's other dogs running past. And honestly, I think understanding this alone can dissolve so much frustration that owners feel. And it also helps you shift into compassion too, because instead of thinking, oh God, he knows this cue, I know he knows this, I'm so angry, I'm so irritated, you start thinking, actually, have I taught this cue in this picture before? Have I layered it up? Have I helped his brain to map this out? Because whilst dogs don't generalize naturally, the beautiful thing is that they can do it with the right structure. So let's talk about how powerful this is from a neuroscience perspective. Okay, dogs' brains are wired to create very strong sensory and emotional associations. The hippocampus, the memory center, works really closely with the amygdala, the emotional center, to store experiences as clusters of information, not as clean little words, but as rich, textured, emotional vignettes, like I talked about before. And this is why if a dog experiences something frightening in a specific location, that spot can become emotionally loaded. You might have noticed this happen to you, that if your dog has ever had like a scary altercation with another dog or something like that at a particular point on a particular footpath, you'll have seen them start to show stress behaviors as you revisit that spot, even though there's now not even another dog present. There's absolutely no one around, and it's clear there's no one around, but it doesn't matter because the overall picture to them is scarily similar. It's the same sights, maybe the same smells and sounds. And so it's enough for them to still perceive threat. But this also works with learning. So if your dog first learns a behavior in a calm, controlled space where they feel safe and they feel regulated, their brain tags that behavior as something that lives in that emotional space. But if the dog is learning something, let's say impulse control or reactivity foundations, when they're already escalated or overwhelmed, their brain will tag that behavior with that state instead. And this is why so many owners say, oh, he can disengage beautifully at home, but on the street, he's totally frantic. Well, it's not that the behavior isn't learned. It's that the behavior is just tied to the wrong context and emotion. It's been tagged up wrong, right? Meaning that state dependent learning, emotional state dependency, is massive here. If your dog is calm, their prefrontal cortex is active, and that's the decision making, impulse control part of the brain, the thinking brain. If your dog is dysregulated, their amygdala, or as I like to call it, Captain Panic, has taken the steering wheel. And so the key point in all of this is your dog cannot pull a behavior from a calm training moment into a stressed real life moment unless you've intentionally built that bridge for them. And like I say, this is where most training plans fall apart for reactive dogs, nervous dogs, hypervigilant dogs, but also for your average, easily distracted adolescent dog as well. So, knowing that, how can we go one step further and make all of this helpful and practical? Because this kind of knowledge is amazing, but it only really has power when we can apply it, right? So, if your dog only listens in one place, it means the behavior is tied to that environment. And to contextualize that, for all the humans listening, you can think of it like remembering someone's name, but only when you're standing in the room that you met them and they introduce themselves in, right? So, what do? Well, you slowly, and I mean very slowly, begin altering one element at a time. Not everything, not the whole world, just one tiny layer. So maybe you move from the kitchen to the living room. Same cue, same tone, same loose structure. We're still at home. We've still got the same feelings about where we are. But now, the lighting is different. The flooring is different. The soundscape is different. The picture is new. And at first, your dog might act like you've never trained them in their life. And that's normal. That's good. That's totally fine. It tells you their brain is just recalibrating. And this is now about to become the moment that generalization is happening. And from here on in, with every tweak and every slightly altered repetition, every new environment becomes a little moment of brain plasticity, stretching, reshaping, rewiring. Long term, it makes the behavior you're teaching more flexible and it makes the behavior more robust. So let me give you a real world example here. Okay. Recall, right? Everyone's favorite struggle. Now, most dogs can recall indoors like absolute champions. You call their name, they trot over, tail wagging, happy to see you, perfect. You take that same recall cue to the park and it feels like you're speaking a dead language. And owners often assume recall is bad because the dog just doesn't want to come back. And to be real, to be fair, if the dog's getting a better offer out there from the environment than from you, maybe they don't want to come back. That's a separate issue for a separate episode. But actually, far more commonly, the most likely reason is that recall has been practiced in exactly one context, one picture, indoors or in your garden, and that's it. The park is a totally different sensory landscape. It's literally a neon Las Vegas of scent and wildlife and dogs and wind patterns and adrenaline. And that recall isn't broken, it's just completely untransferred at this point. So, again, you work in layers. First, you take it out to the garden. Then you take it onto the driveway, which probably has a different emotional tag because maybe it's where, normally you start the walks. It means something different is going to happen than going in the garden. Then you go further, you go onto a quiet little side street. Then you go into a quiet field. Not with pressure, not with panic, but with the understanding that your dog's brain genuinely needs these layers to understand that your recall cue means you need to come back to me everywhere, not just in the kitchen where that bowl full of chicken was. And this is where we get to the real gold because truly, context training resolves the vast majority of my dog ignores me outside issues. Just this one piece of knowledge applied properly could save about 80% of people's most common training frustrations. So, now that we've got that nailed, let's take this up a notch for our reactive dog owners because there's another level to proofing when it comes to the dogs who are over aroused or stressed. And this is a really important piece to the reactivity puzzle. So, reactive dogs often have beautifully trained skills in the house if their owners have been working through a reactivity program. So they have nailed cues like look at me, the touch cue, engage, disengage, all of that really valuable stuff, all of those exercises that it's really important that we skill our reactive dogs up with. And yet, despite so much hard work on the part of the owner, the behavior completely evaporates the moment they're in the real world because the emotional intensity is too high for the dog to access those skills. Now, what we need to remember here is if a behavior was only ever practiced when the dog was calm, then the dog believes that behavior belongs to calm moments only. They don't know yet that they can do it in the presence of a trigger. And this is why foundation work is so incredibly important. Teaching engagement in 10 different safe contexts before a trigger ever shows up. Teaching your dog that the world may look different, but your communication remains consistent. Teaching these dogs to respond to these cues not only when they're sitting still and calm and waiting for instruction in a training session, but actually when they are in a higher state of arousal because they're in the middle of a game of tug and then you've asked for a rep. Practicing that cue in not only different environments and situations, but also different emotional states. This is the stuff that prevents all of your training progress from completely dissolving the moment another dog walks by. And a lot of owners can also think that the real training begins when the trigger is present in reactivity cases. But in reality, the real training begins way, way before that with teaching the dog to retrieve the right behaviors across different pictures. If you put enough effort into this, it can have a game changing effect on making those really valuable trained behaviors feel still completely accessible, even when your dog's emotions rise up. Now, let me give you a couple of ridiculously common everyday examples of this in action, okay? And you may well recognize yourself and your dog in some of these. And if you do, that's totally fine because now you already have some ideas up your sleeve on how you can work through it. But I see this all the time. A dog who heals beautifully in their training class, but then they drag you all the way down the road back home. That is contextual learning. A dog who settles perfectly in their bed, but paces and whines when you take them to a cafe. Contextual learning again. None of it is stubbornness. None of it means the dog is like testing you or pushing your boundaries. Their brain simply hasn't built the neural pathways for that new picture. Another thing I find fascinating about this is that dogs can also contextualize by time or sequence as well. So, for example, many dogs behave differently on the morning walk versus the evening walk because the routine associated with that time builds a different emotional context. Or you could think of the dogs who go wild the second you pick up your keys. That's got nothing to do with the keys themselves. Your dog isn't finding the keys exciting. It's the sequence of events that their brain has tagged together. When you pick up the keys, you put your coat on, the lead goes on, you go out. They've learnt that entire story because it's been learnt contextually. And when we work with this knowledge instead of against it, training suddenly becomes smoother, it's more predictable, it's more effective, and it's genuinely more enjoyable. So, one of my favorite little measures of success to give people is that a behavior is not truly learned until your dog can perform it in at least 5 different pictures. So, if you can call to mind something you'd like to work on with your dog, whether it is settling calmly or loose lead walking or responding to a certain cue that you have in mind, like a recall, you can challenge yourself to train through it in 5 completely different contexts and aim for success in each and every one. And the best thing about starting to work with this is once a dog has learned to generalize 1 or 2 behaviors properly, they absolutely get faster and faster at generalizing new ones. Their brain becomes more flexible and the process becomes easier because over time, you're not just building obedience, but you're building their mental agility as well. So, this week, I'm going to end on a positive, encouraging note because I know so many dog owners feel disheartened by inconsistency in their dog's behavior, but inconsistency is just incomplete generalization. And I think that is such a hopeful thing because it means nothing is set in stone, nothing is fixed, nothing is unfixable. Your dog is not just ignoring you, their brain is just saying, can you help me connect these dots? Can you show me that this behavior lives in this new picture as well? And when you embrace that and then take the steps to do that, everything changes. Behavior gradually becomes more and more reliable, and heading out into the big wide world with your dog becomes far more of a joy and far less of a chore. And that is the magic of contextual learning. So, I hope today's episode has given you a whole new way of looking at your dog's world, not just the behaviors you want to train, but the way their brain actually experiences life. I think it's truly fascinating. It's deeply logical in some ways, and it genuinely empowers you to become a better communicator and teacher for your dog. All right, my loves, thank you for walking with me today or inviting me on your walk. If you enjoyed this deep dive, I would love it if you would share it with someone who you think needs to hear it, or share it on your Instagram stories, or come and find me on Instagram and let me know what you think. I'm at Listen Dog Training. And if this episode has sparked a little fire inside you and you are ready and you are re-enthused to hop back on the training bus with gusto, then you can explore these concepts in even more detail and with even more supporting resources inside my training courses, where I guide you step by step through building reliable, generalized, real life behavior in a way that's really good fun for both you and your dog. So, have a gorgeous rest of your day, and I will see you same time next week for another episode of The Walk and Talk.